cradle of civilization. Cradle of civilization. Cradle of civilization.
Hello, everybody. How is everyone doing today? Does the audio sound weird? Well, let's see if the audio even works. Sorry, everyone. I need an audio engineer. I need someone that knows what they're doing. How is everyone doing today? I think audio's good, but you guys let me know if not. What's up, audio vibes? How you doing? So today's a very special episode because we are going back to Africa. We are in the tradition of Malcolm X, Marcus Garvey, Dave Chappelle. We are going back to the motherland, or so that is what Zohran Mamdani is doing. It is a puzzling decision, but I think that it's actually pretty good. It's a theory, though, that I'm 20% confident on. So, you know, it's very important when the candidate of an election decides to leave internationally, especially in the middle of a race, right? But, you know, he's going back to Uganda, and he made a very good ad about it. So let's keep this on theme while we check our poly market, as we always do. By the way, super chats now work, but you do have the option, if you do want to send any money, to send it to my PayPal, just so YouTube does not eat your money up in fees. So let's see here. Let's get a refresh. And all right, we're going back to Africa, and the poll numbers are like 1% up. This guy can't stop, man. He cannot lose. We're down to 13% from Andrew Cuomo after a high of 17.5, 17.3, and this was on the 16th, so last week. Just getting crushed, man. Eric Adams getting crushed. Curtis Silva at 2%. That's impossible. Let's see how much you get for betting on Silva. So you bet $100. Look at that. You make $4,000. I wouldn't take that bet. But it's good odds if you believe that. So, as you can see, Zohran supporters should be incredibly happy. You should be very proud. I can't, says Audio Vibes. Yes, you can. Going back to the motherland. It's very cool to have a candidate like this. Very brave to do something like this. And most people would say it makes no sense. But I think it can make some sense. So now that we have, this episode being set up, we're going back to Africa.
Cradle of civilization.
So let's really get into our news, all right? Let's start here. This is the news coverage of the Zohran video, which we'll watch afterwards.
Democrat Zohran Mamdani is taking a break from the race for mayor to reconnect with his roots in the African country of Uganda. He made the announcement today in an online video. Mamdani was born in Uganda's capital, Kampala. He says he and his wife will call on old friends and family until the end of the month. Then, Mamdani insists he will gear up the campaign while recognizing that his trip may draw public scrutiny.
Here are a few of my humble suggestions for headlines. MIA, Mamdani in Africa. Uganda miss me. He's completely crazy. The Afra can't be serious.
Mamdani's trip is already drawing fire from incumbent Eric Adams. He insists he is busy showing his ability to work as mayor. Meanwhile, Andrew Cuomo is also traveling. He's hitting towns around the state to highlight his independent run.
All right, and now let's actually watch Zohran's ad, which he made, which was very skillful, very well done, about his trip back to Africa. As usual, do we have to get into the expert framing down to center here? Not super traditional, but we still have the thirds here, so very good. What is there to say about the filmmaking that I haven't said? It's great. It's some of the best that you'll see. How you doing, LB Things? How are you? So let's actually watch the ad of him going back to Africa.
Cradle of civilization.
Being a politician means listening, not just to your supporters, but your critics too. And some of these critics, especially on a certain website, have been giving me consistent advice. For example, at SamWhite087, Zohran, go back to Uganda, where you come from and belong. At Teflon Gone, loser, go back to Africa. There are thousands like this from across the country. I hear you. And I agree. I'm going back to Uganda. I'm headed there in a personal capacity to celebrate Rama and I's marriage with our family and friends. But I do want to apologize to the haters, because I will be coming back. And since you will undoubtedly read about this trip in the New York Post, inshallah on the front page, here are a few of my humble suggestions for headlines. MIA, Mamdani in Africa. Uganda miss me. He's completely crazy. The Afra can't be serious. Carl Kampala-Neely investigates Mamdani. Zoe running away.
All right, so very funny, very well done, but I think that there's something deeper here. So my theory on the Africa thing, is that there is no purpose in Zohran staying stateside at the moment. In fact, it can only harm him, honestly, because he is already a familiar presence. We covered what Bill O'Reilly said, which was pretty good, where he said, there's Zohran fatigue. And I think that even if you're a supporter, you can feel this. Does he need to build more public image? I mean, he's kind of maxed that out. What else can you do? You're on social media everywhere. You're covered internationally and nationally. There's only drawbacks to staying here with 4 months left of a race, in my opinion. And that's why I think this is more skillful than he's letting on. He's saying it's for family. I think in reality, it's just, why am I going to stay here? Doesn't make sense. With the African music in the background says LB, yeah. And we have our African music here for the day. So that's why I think this ad was put out, because there's no point in staying here. It's only cost potentially, right? What I like here is it's very humble. We have a simple Casio watch. Not a fan of the rings. Great tie. Great dress sense. What are you going to say? Now, what people focused on very little, but is very smart. Let's pause here just so I can hear myself think, is I wanted to play Ganai by Willie Colon, but we can't do that because you get a copyright. I don't know how copyright strikes work, but you get them if you play music, basically. So I had to find something public domain. So the New York Post, if you don't know, is a traditionally conservative, some would say right-wing, but just conservative in my view, publication in New York. And they say a lot of controversial stuff usually. You know, they're not, they have these funny headlines like this. Some of them work, some of them don't. What are you going to do? They have to make them every day, right? And he did a couple here. This reminds me a lot of something that Bill Maher, who I detest, does, where he does future headlines before he goes on break. LB, that didn't come up because of the words, but let me remind you, Leo, Bill O'Reilly paid $20 million for essay of a Fox coworker. Yeah. But I still think Bill O'Reilly, because of that experience, his analysis is a lot more humbled, and he does bring some value in terms of alpha to understand how his side feels about the race, you know? But yeah, Bill O'Reilly, he had that huge scandal. That's why he's on YouTube. That's the video we covered, was him on YouTube. Bill O'Reilly's an interesting guy. I mentioned it before. He actually started off his career teaching in Apalaka, which was a hippie and Black American area. It is a Black American area now in Miami, which is really weird. He was a public school teacher there. And that city's famous for its architecture, which is Moorish in style, because back in the day they branded Florida in different ways. But what's cool, what's interesting is that he did that. You know, the woman who's standing over the picture of the body in the Kent State picture is from Apalaka. So pretty weird. But back to this. This is smart because he's preempting any criticism of this decision. He's announcing this decision and telling you how people are going to, respond to it, which is smart. You want to basically disarm everyone that's going to criticize you. LB says, nope, he's a broke hack, can't sell a book. His books are ridiculous. Pinheads and Patriots, ridiculous. Corpo Dems won't defend Mamdani, so it's open season on him. Yeah, they won't defend or endorse. I think hack... I understand your sentiment. I'm not saying I completely disagree, but I think hack would apply more to, like, I don't know. Who's a hack? A hack on the liberal side would be someone like, I guess, like Jake Tapper. Jake Tapper's a hack. Like, he's just terrible, you know? On the conservative side, I think it'd be more like, even Jesse Waters, I wouldn't call him a hack, but there's like, Ben Shapiro's a hack, to me at least, you know? Ben Shapiro, that whole Daily Wire crew. Bill O'Reilly just strikes me as kind of like a old school Irish guy who got way too crazy on TV, and I don't know. I like checking in on him because his analysis is not like a lot of the rest you'll see on Fox News. It's kind of like Tucker Carlson is interesting analysis because it's not the same you'll see on Fox News. So it's interesting to see what that part of the party's thinking. Andrew says Jake Tapper's a hack. Jake Tapper is the worst one. I hate Jake Tapper. Jake Tapper is terrible. Bill Maher is I can't tell Bill Maher's a hack. He's just stupid, I think. Hakeem Jeffrey says LB things. Yep, his lack of endorsement. We covered it. It's just terrible. Terrible. So, you know, we're going... This is really funny. You know, like, this is well done. This ad.
Be serious. Crazy.
This is great graphic design here. Great spacing. But it's just good to anticipate what people are going to say about you. And it's also very good. I didn't know this was legal to call out people by name here on their Twitter handles because it's funny. It adds to it. You know, I don't even know why you would say this because his family was kicked out of Uganda for, being Indian under Idi Amin. But, they're pretty funny. Yeah, go back to Africa, the
Cradle of civilization.
The cradle of civilization. And he's going back. So I think it's a good strategy. Why be here in New York? Also, the other thing that could be a part of it, but I don't know, is maybe he got tipped off at some sort of scandal that's coming out on his side. I don't even know what it could be at this point, since he's a jihadist, Ku Klux Klan member, Islamist, Osama bin Laden supporting, Hamas supporting, wife beating, everything at this point. So I put a low probability on that. But it's just a matter of why risk public image at the moment, LB says they're the same shock. Why was Tucker fired again? Oh yeah, $800 million settlement to Dominion voting. Yeah. But Tucker's his book is actually an interesting read. The Ship of Fools. I read it back when it came out, I think 2017. And it wasn't your standard Politico book. Like, it was actually interesting. He went into the history of the Sierra Club and a lot of stuff that I didn't know. And I was like, oh, this is pretty interesting. Tucker Carlson is a guy who said he would vote for Elizabeth Warren over Donald Trump if Elizabeth Warren changed a little bit because he likes her economic policy. I think at this point, I don't want to join in the bandwagon, but I think he's getting money from some people because it's weird. And his dad worked for the CIA and all that, so it's weird, LB, what do you mean, what? Andrew says, absence makes the heart grow fonder, as they say. Absolutely true, Andrew. Yeah, that's the other thing. It's like, if I'm out of public life, no one can be fatigued. LB says you can't trust these people. Leo, they're bad faith. You can't trust anyone in media. I can't think of anyone that you can trust. I agree with you on that. Don't trust any of these people. As I always do with media analysis here, we don't look at the media itself. We look at the underlying real agenda, what they actually want, which they always have to say, but they can't say it directly. Don't ever trust media at all, except for, I guess, independent people. Like ProPublica does good work. The Associated Press, trust it on events and timelines, but don't trust it on anything else. Yeah, media is just crap. Don't trust these people. I completely agree with you on that. And as far as bad faith, yeah, they're all bad faith. Completely agree with you. Liz Warren backed him up on CNBC with the stock market goofies. Who? You mean Zohran? That'd be interesting to see. Warren has... It's unfortunate because Warren's really smart too, because she wrote that book, Two Income Trap, in the 90s. And it's a good book. It's worth checking out. I haven't read the whole thing. I've read excerpts. And it's interesting to say the least. But I think Trump drove her a little crazy, honestly, which is not unusual. All right. So let's move on here because, all right, we have the main story. Now, I thought this clip was interesting. And again, these guys, I'm not saying I'm a fan. I'm not saying I love this stuff. I'm just saying that these are important podcasts because they helped win Donald Trump the election. And that's why it's important to actually watch them and understand what they're saying. Okay? And the title of this video is Flagrant. The name of the podcast wants Zohran Mamdani on the pod. It's interesting because Flagrant is hosted by Andrew Schultz, who recently had Sagar Anjeti on from Breaking Points. They've also had, Pete Buttigieg recently. Because they've kind of, I can't say they've abandoned Trump. Sorry, that's my little Marco moment. I'm really thirsty today, guys. I had a stressful day yesterday. It was just a ton of work. I'm sorry if I'm a little off kilter, but LB thing says Media's Touch, Mediaite, More Perfect Union. Yeah, Mediaite's pretty good. I haven't checked out Media's Midas Touch, but yeah, Mother Jones used to do some good work too. Mother Jones was pretty good. Yeah, and also some of these sources, there's interesting stuff. Even Foreign Policy, even though it's like a total Fed front, is an interesting magazine. The Economist used to be my favorite. The Economist was so good before the most recent editor took over. The Economist was the best one. I loved The Economist, but The Economist became an incredibly racist magazine towards Chinese people. It's really a shame because it was a good magazine before that. But Andrew Schultz here, he seems to be one of these, I used to be a Democrat. I voted for Donald Trump because, I was tired of the economy, and that's fine. That's fine. I don't know if he's sincere or if he's insincere. He strikes me as, as a comedian who's just trying to, I don't know. It's not audience growth because he's already huge, but it's interesting. So here he makes an appeal to have Zohran Mamdani on the podcast, and he lives in New York. Before we actually look at that, let's see something interesting that he said here on X. On X, I saw the clip. All right, let's see. So this was pretty cool because he was criticizing Dave Portnoy, who we covered before, who's probably one of the most annoying people in American politics at this point. The Atlantic is how be things. The Atlantic, you can find some value in. Even the Spectator too. It's just tough nowadays to find people who are actually trying to inform you. Because in journalism, I'm not one of these conservatives like, oh, journalism used to be great. It was never good. Journalism was always terrible. If you don't believe me, look up Marat. Okay, look at what he did during the French Revolution, or with Lemmy the Pup. All right. Let's see here what Andrew Schultz said to Sagar and Jetty in regards to Dave Portnoy, who has been one of the more annoying people in this election cycle.
We supposed to interpret that any differently.
And then Portnoy is like, he's a socialist. He's a communist.
last thing I wanted to
he's
get
a
to.
communist. He's doing all these things.
Yeah.
It's like, Portnoy, just say you're upset about the Israel.
Right.
Like,
Yeah.
Stop acting like you don't live in New York. Stop acting like you care.
You live in Miami, bro.
Exactly. You stop acting like you care if like a socialist communist runs New York. You're upset because he said globalize the Intifada. Just make it about that. You're allowed to make it about that.
Sure.
But don't.
And they tried already, actually.
Yeah,
How did
and it
that
doesn't work.
out?
But like,
You spend just enough days here to not pay New York taxes, and then you go back. Which I don't blame you for. I do it too. But like, let's be honest. We supposed to interpret that any differently.
It's pretty interesting because the topic of Israel has gotten more mainstream now, and now you're kind of allowed to say Dave Portnoy doesn't like Zohran because of Israel, which is a few years ago that would have been considered some pretty bad stuff to say, but that's how it is. So LB says Andrew Schultz, the millionaire, is tired of the economy. Yeah, I think he was influenced too by the free speech thing. He perceived Trump as like a free speech guy, which is at the very least debatable at this point. But I'm not exactly sure. He just strikes me as an apolitical guy who has found that politics is a pretty good topic to get engagement. But it's fine. Let's see what he has to say here about having Zohran on.
I know accents. I have 3. None of them, I have 3 accents, okay? Most New Yorkers have between 2 and 4 accents,
So
okay?
he's a real New Yorker.
No, but this one we don't have here. There's no politician accent in New York.
When did he move here? Because he went to school in Uganda or whatever. Probably went to
So
a British
where's that
school.
click shit?
He probably went to a
Why
British
isn't he
school.
clicking? That's what
But
I
he
want.
probably went to a British school.
I
That's
want
where
him
he
to be
picked up.
frustrated with someone and suck his teeth. Like, you know that? I want to, if you do that, if he said that to Cuomo, Al, you're such a fucking cracker, man.
Yeah,
you
dude, you fucking
can't even make
football player.
African jokes around you, dude.
Yeah.
You don't even know what the fuck we're talking about.
Yeah, dude.
Not when he was 7. Yeah, he probably shouldn't have an accent from you.
I'm pissed off he doesn't have a bowl hanging from his bottom lip. Like, are you from Africa or not? You know what I'm saying? Where's the bowl on your bottom lip?
Yes, dude.
Sir?
Yes.
Look at this guy. Got a regular lip.
He is handsome, though.
I love this guy, dude.
He is handsome.
Good-looking Kardashian.
Between him and Elon, dude, Africans are taking over American politics.
Yo, non-African Africans are crushing it.
I mean, they've been ducking us, but yeah, I like them.
Yo, that's the other thing. Because let's what is it? What is that?
Cards on the table.
Yes.
No. Put a nail in it or something like that. Clear the slate, whatever like that.
Clear the air.
Put a bone in his nose? What do you say?
We'll get there.
Wait, what is it? What are you trying to say
Let's
right
put
now?
a bowl in the lip right
No,
now.
you're being
Let's put
so
a bowl in the lip
racist,
right
bro.
now. Listen, let's ring up the neck. Let's bring up the. I don't even know if that's in Africa. I think it might be like an Asian
I think
tribe.
it's Malaysia.
Malaysia. All right, shout out them. Okay.
Indonesia. I don't know.
Okay, so listen, I've had a lot of people reach out, yo, you can have Mamdani on, okay? Yeah, we've been trying to have them on. And Mamdani, maybe your comms people aren't getting back to you or whatever it is, but like they've been ghosting us. Initially, I think they were reaching out a lot. You were in touch with them. They were really trying to come on.
Yes, they were.
We had to go to Ibiza before they want to turn this into, the expanding the caliphate to New York City.
Also, don't say we. What do you mean we?
The Royal.
Let's pause there. Obviously, there's some stereotypes here. As Andrew says, click, the fuck. LB racist and that black man saying, yeah. But, I guess this is like 90s humor. I don't know. It's very stereotypical. But regardless, this is an amazing opportunity for the Mamdani campaign. Because if we've learned anything is that if you handle this, if you can come in there and frame it the right way, you can benefit greatly from the media exposure. I mean, this is just a clips channel from the channel. It has 1 million subscribers. And while we can't say he needs a lot more media exposure, this is something that would connect more with the disaffected Trump voting youth, which I'm not sure how big that is in New York as a demographic. But I think for Staten Island and stuff, I believe Andrew Schultz is from Staten Island because he mentions it a lot. It's just, this is a tremendous opportunity. I understand why he wouldn't do it right now. These people, and he has it here, should be begging to have him on. He should not be begging them. It's not high value. And the fact that they made this appeal, despite, this might as well be Monica Lewinsky jokes, because of how dated it sounds, this is something that has tremendous value for any politician. That's why these guys have gotten all sorts of politicians after the Trump victory. And I think that he would be able to handle himself pretty well here because despite, this, he does have an ally in Andrew Schultz's co-host in the sense of like they're both ethnically similar, right? They're both of Indian descent or subcontinental descent, despite different religions and stuff. So these are, I guess, a representative of the young New Yorker, I don't know, who likes like 90s humor, So it's not a bad opportunity. And this is actually really good that they're begging to have him on as opposed to the other way around. Because if it were the other way around, if he was like, I want to go on your podcast, it would be perceived as incredibly low value, in my opinion. Let's see here. LB thinks says, who wouldn't dare run his mouth in Harlem? Yeah, I don't know how these jokes, Africa, Botswana, and Rwanda are the fastest growing economies in the world and have been for the past decade. So I don't know. It's something that's weird, these are stereotypes that are pretty dated, bone in the nose and stuff, but I guess this is funny. I mean, I'm not God, right? I don't know what's funny. But if this thing has 1 million subscribers, it's funny to someone. Andrew says he should go and call her daddy instead. Yeah, no, that was the combo, a mistake, right? Because these podcasts, they are a male field for the most part. They are, in terms of this side of it, right? The political side that, for example, is recommended to me because YouTube and Google are going to recommend stuff that appeals to your demographic, right? It's going to be this kind of podcast, for better or worse. And this is really, really good to have them begging him to come on. And even with the backstory they're saying, it still looks kind of pathetic in some ways because it's like, oh, well, you were begging us. Well, now I don't need you. It's the classic, he pretty woman them, right? But this would be something great to come on, especially in the lead up to the election in terms of, that October, September, later period. Let's keep seeing their appeal here.
This is the royal we, Mamdani.
Exactly. So, listen, we all went on vacation, right? And, okay, and then I come back from vacation. I'm trying to email a comms. I'm texting the comms person. I DM them. They gave me a little cold shoulder when I DM'd, and then somebody else in the DMs was like, oh, actually, yeah, I heard we're in touch with some people.
I also think it's important to mention that Eric Adams has been doing this type of content for the past few weeks. He did an interview with this streamer who's down here in Miami, Sneeko, I believe. We didn't get to watch that here, which he was criticized for, but at the end of the day, it doesn't matter because publicity is publicity, man. It doesn't matter. And so this is a competitive field to be in, especially if the other candidate has already staked a claim in it.
Blah, blah, blah.
I tried to get him like a month and a half ago, brown to brown, man to man interview. He wouldn't even. Nothing.
I'm just.
And as I predicted, he is going to be an ally, right? Even though they have different religions, it's not a big deal. At the end, I mean, sure, it's a big deal. It's a big deal for anyone, right? If you have a different religion, but also like there's an ethnic kinship, which is good for a podcast,
saying it you know, this is the biggest podcast in New York City by far. You know, you have the ability to touch all these different people. You're going to do these little live streams and these other things. Like, it probably could be a good idea to come. So maybe, Zohran, maybe your people aren't telling you, or obviously things are kind of busy, but if you want it, you want it. It's simple as that. You know what I mean? If you want to be mayor of the greatest city in the world, you got to get after it. You got to touch everybody.
Really quick here, because this was good. Let's listen to it again. Because what you, LB, and Andrew are saying right now, guys, that's why it's important. Because it's something where, look, I had heard of Joe Rogan, like you said, Tim Dillon. I never really watched this stuff, right? But this stuff is like flagrant. I don't know, what other podcasts did they do? They did some other podcasts like this. They are important. Like, it's now empirically proven that they are important for these. I mean, unless we don't think so, and this is just a cope that's used, but I do think that they play a role, because we can say for sure that an interview on here, even especially if you haven't heard of it, it has more value than CNN. It gets more reach. It gets more of an audience. And so they are important for that. I assume this is from a 16 to like 32-year-old male demographic who listens to this stuff mostly, and is their taste. I've never listened to. I was never a fan of Charlemagne the God or Andrew Schultz, because I just found them corny. But that's fine. That's other people don't. There's a different strokes, right?
Be mayor of the greatest city in the world. You got to get after it. You got to touch everybody. So,
yeah, take it from Cuomo. I know. That's how.
All right, the joke clouded it, but this is still begging, and also some sort of instructive thing, which is true, where you should be on this. You should be on these podcasts because they have broad appeal, despite everything. He's saying, like, if you want to get on here, this would benefit you more than me. Andrew says, I don't really watch normie stuff, to be frank. Very wonky, more niche politics. Yeah, and that's fine. But at the end of the day, if only people that, tried to be informed voted, it'd be a good model. But the thing is, everyone votes now, for the most part. No, actually, election turnout is very low. But the people that are going to vote are people that are easily animated and do stuff. They feel pissed off about something, and the people that they're listening to are reinforcing that. It's a good thing to appeal to them on their territory. What's the last thing they just said? I don't remember. LB. Let's see.
You got to do it, but if you want to win, you got to touch everybody.
We just want to put it out right now, so we don't have any of this election shit, right? He's been asked. His people are not getting back to us. They were asking to come on a lot after the win. They've kind of gone ghost. Win on the primary, they've gone ghost. So, Zohran, maybe this will reach you. Maybe some. I've also asked other people to go reach out to him, whatever. I don't want to say they're ducking us. But they're ducking us. Yeah. No, so listen, we have a seat right here. We'd love to sit down and talk to you about, some of your policies and how you've managed to galvanize white losers to support you. And son, there's no minorities that voted for him. I looked at the demographics.
I don't vote, but yeah, I would have.
I'm telling you, they don't.
Black people
it's
didn't
all
vote
white
for him.
people. It's all of Brooklyn. It's all of white Brooklyn voted for him.
Yeah.
Black
and
people,
all of Queens. Queens is the most diverse.
I don't think black people really voted for him. I think
he had
white
all
people.
of Queens.
It's only white people. He had his little neighborhood, which is the whitest neighborhood in Queens.
He lost the Bronx, yeah.
Of course he lost the Bronx, because there's no white people there. The only white person in the Bronx owns the Yankees. So, yeah. So I want to know how he's galvanized. I mean, what I assume it has a lot to do with the college loan thing. So it's just like people who go to college. Obviously, no one in the Bronx has ever done that, but like people obviously.
Yo, you better chill out.
What, is that what the Bronx is known for? Higher education?
I keep talking that shit.
What?
There's a college up there.
That's the 4 or 5 train away. They gonna come down and smack the shit out of you.
And they would prove my point. They're busy drilling, dude. They're drilling. They're drilling. Okay? No one in Bushwick, Fort Greene, or Williamsburg is drilling. Okay?
Williamsburg, they're drilling.
Yeah,
The Jews. They're getting underground.
Tunnels. Yo, Mamdani, are you going to allow the Jews to build tunnels wherever they want?
Do you see what happened in Borough Park?
No.
99% voted against Mamdani. It's the highest non-Mamdani neighborhood.
What is Borough Park?
It's all
That's the
Hasidics.
Jews, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, but I heard there were some Hasidic communities, or there were some Jewish communities that actually supported him.
Maybe, but the Hasids are like the most like, they just vote all together at once.
Yeah,
Really
yeah.
good.
Singular brain.
Yeah.
They're like those. What is
I hate
that
when I
fucking?
say yeah. He'll say something, I go, yeah.
No, they do have a singular brain. Like, I think that's what makes them so effective as like a voting block. It's like there's the rabbi says this is what's going down, and then they do it. Look how they dress. There's no like individualism.
Who's that 1%? They're going to find that guy. Who was that 1% that didn't listen?
Yeah.
He said 99% in Borough Park.
That's a
100.
good point.
Yeah.
There's one gentrifier, dude.
Yeah, it's fucking modest Yahoo.
All right, I think that's all the value we can get out of it, but it's not bad, you know. And if you look at the comments, you know, top comment is y'all New Yorkers are screwed if you elect this fool. So as you can see, I mean, this is pretty early. Thanks for the video. Channel's down bad with all the bot comments. All right, but these are people. They would benefit from having this outreach, in my opinion. And especially after having gone to Uganda, you know, you come back and you're, hey, everyone, you know, LB thing says, damn, Dougie Bronx more racism. Yeah. But, you know, it still has its appeal, the show itself, because people watch. So I think that here it would be good to transition here because Kevin O'Leary, the Shark Tank Mr. Wonderful guy, I actually saw him once at a Bitcoin conference. He was walking very fast. Shorter guy, which is fine. You know. All right. So he he was going to run for PM in Canada, or so he flirted with it, which did not work out for him or the conservative Lefebvre that actually did run. And he's become a sort of voice in politics that people take, I guess, seriously. Some people might, especially here in the business community, because this is Fox Business. It's like CNBC. Audie Vibe says, Mr. Wonderful scares me. Yeah, Mr. Wonderful is, you know, the best you can say is, you know, at least he doesn't seem to me to have started his career as a scammer. You know, he was in education and education technology, I believe. Yeah. So let's see what he has to say about the Mamdani campaign, because despite being a Canadian, I do believe he has American citizenship, and he does a lot of business in New York, according to him. So, or Wonder Bar. That's pretty funny. Let's see what he has to say here on Fox Business. Remember, this is not Fox News, so it's a little bit more serious than Fox News. It's like CNBC. It's the financial press. And he always is a little more technical with his attacks, and he supported Donald Trump in the last election. So, you know, we can't say for sure empirically that was the reason that Trump won, but it at least was something that happened while Trump won. Let's see.
All right, so Stephen Moore is warning that Mamdani's radical agenda would send the city into economic freefall, driving out the wealthy, shrinking the tax base, pushing the middle class further into the red. It is already happening. We've been watching it. Businesses are in a holding pattern. They're waiting to see if a Marxist is going to be the next mayor here. Even Hakeem Jeffries, the House Minority Leader, reportedly walked away from a face-to-face meeting unimpressed with Mamdani the commie. But Mamdani isn't just a flash in the pan.
That's good to hear. Mamdani the commie. That's a good one. Haven't heard it much, but maybe it's a Fox Business thing. That's not a bad brand. Mamdani the commie. What was the other one? Madmani was the one that PBD was using. So they've struggled to make one take off, but that one at least has some rhyme to it. It's interesting. I mean, not really. It's like some old school shit, but, you know, I guess this is still the Cold War, and we are all victims of fucking the Cold War still for some reason. But that's not a bad brand to use against them. That's pretty smart. I don't hate it, especially with the boomer crowd, which is who's watching Fox Business for the most part.
And he's a red flag, a warning of what happens when economic fantasies collide with reality and real people pay the price.
In the Biden years, at least, that was when it was last surveyed, Gen Z had more favorable attitudes to socialism than capitalism, which to me spells the right answer. You can bash Mamdani or the other side all we want. What we're missing is making a positive case for capitalism itself.
This is another interview. We've seen other ones that Vivek has done, but it's the same message, and it's at least it's technically correct. in some sense, which is that capitalism does not have good PR at the moment in the country. And you wouldn't be surprised, why, given the state of the economy for most people on the lower end of the totem pole as well as the middle end of the totem pole. So this is at least an analysis that's somewhat informed from Vivek.
If we're being honest, that's something that even the GOP at times has now in recent years gone soft on.
And it's something that we talk about a lot on the show. Capitalism versus socialism. What is at stake? This is a battle that's going to go on for decades to come. But Kevin, I want to come to you first because the concern here is that fringe progressives like AOC, squad-like members like this character Zohran Mamdani are spreading their tentacles. If all of a sudden he takes New York, and even if he can't implement his policies, but he's just, a flailing socialist and he's leading this city, that really sends a pretty strong message.
It does, and I'm a policy guy, and I have to disclose something. I'm here in New York for 2 days. I reached out to his people last night and again this morning. I asked for a face-to-face meeting while I was here. Obviously, he's not here. He's in Uganda right now. But I also got a message back saying no interest in meeting, which is, for me, at least his people said that. I don't know if it's got to his ear yet. I'm quite shocked. He should take as many meetings with people like me as he possibly can. I want to find out how much of his policies are rhetoric and how much are reality in case he...
There's two ways of taking that if it's all how it happened. And, all right. In theory, it is good for him to reach out and talk to someone influential like this. It is good because this guy can become a surrogate. However, the other side to that coin is one that a lot of people have learned. Maybe it's an Alinskyist tactic, and it's a good one. And this is something that I would urge you to apply in your personal life as well, which is there is no benefit to dialogue. There is none. Dialogue is concessions, inevitably, and it's stupid. And there's no reason to do it. That's mostly, okay? You should not argue with people about politics in your personal life, in my opinion, because dialogue is a waste of time and it just strains relationships. And especially in politics, what is the purpose? Cui bono, right? If I talk to you, I'm not going to convince you, and you're not going to convince me. So I'm wasting my time that I could use productively in something else. So it's interesting to see that approach. I don't know what the reason is that they gave, but I assume that's one of them. Also, there's a factor to consider, which is that if I talk to you, are you going to be honest about what was said? And do I have to say, oh, no, that's not what I said, and then I'm in a battle here? Andrew says, you're not a New Yorker, Kevin, not even American. I think he's an American citizen. I'm not sure. It would make sense for him to be if he's doing all this business. LB says you're the enemy, O'Leary. Right, that's the other thing, right? It's like this is someone who is antagonistic, and there is no benefit, whether you're on the left or right, to talking to the opposition. Everyone has learned this effectively on the libertarian and libertarian-aligned conservative side. This is what happened with gun policy, right? There is no conversation on gun control anymore. The loser conservatives of back in the day would make concessions, they'd say things. But meanwhile, this new generation of the gun lobby, or just people who like guns, they don't even engage in this conversation. They think it's stupid. Why am I going to talk to you? It's just going to lead to concessions. And that is a very smart political strategy. And it's something that, if you ever want to get anything done, whether it be single payer or something like that, you should employ. Why are you making concessions? That's how you end up with Obamacare. Audio says, what a clown. Yeah. Well, he's on Shark Tank, right? And you know what? I don't like to say this about these people. I don't like to call them clowns, stuff like that, because, hey, at the end of the day, they're smarter than us. They figured something that we didn't figure out, right? Because, they can measure with money, right? Unfortunately, it's just the case. LB says, billionaires don't want to pay a 2% tax increase and leave. While mom and pop shops will fill the void. I hope so. LB, because that would be great. That's one of the things that I hope happens with, the collapse, but it's not going to happen, of like when Target or Walmart pull out of an area, that's where you can hope for it, but it tends not to happen. That would be the coolest thing to happen. I agree with you. I like the diversity of mom and pop businesses.
Becomes mayor. This is a very important city for me and all investors. I would think that he would want to listen at this point. because I feel I have some very good advice for him, particularly on his policies around real estate and housing and development of technology and data centers and all of that in New York and New York City. But I was very disappointed. And I expect it's fine to blow me off. I don't think it's good for him. Not a good move, in my view. And I hope he hears this now.
I believe it was last week. He was supposed to sit down with some of the business leaders. They didn't all show up themselves, but the ones who did probed him about what he was all about. He didn't back away from any of it, by the way. He kind of doubled down, and he does it with a very sort of Gavin Newsom, snaky-like smile. Right. Adam, I want to get your take because there will be real financial implications here. Again, regardless of whether he can see the policies through or not, just of having somebody who is a socialist as a figurehead mayor here. So, I mean, we've already seen capital flight here. Right. Businesses will leave more. High earners will also leave. What happens to the city? What happens to Wall Street?
This is such an interesting point because it's so hard for them to make you take it seriously, right? Because if there already is capital flight, if there's already these problems under the Adams administration, why does this matter at all? Why is this conversation relevant? And they would have to make that case, and they have not made it effective. Just doesn't make sense. LB thing says, what, cheating and stealing from people outpass the state middle class? I get you, but these guys, the more important thing, despite the money, is the influence, right? Because these guys can decide elections. Like, that's what does matter about them with money, unless you're very, very intelligent, which is what we kind of covered last stream, which is what Mamdani did effectively. Andrew says, oh no, more Manasapni. What is that, Manasapni? I'd like to know what that is. Monopsony. Let me know what that is, man.
Well, I'm taking this all with a grain of salt. I don't think that he ultimately will become mayor, and I'll tell you why. Only about 500,000 people voted for him. 500,000 in a city of 12 million. In other words, that's fewer than 5%, right? So very few people show up for these primaries. And so I think the people who do show up are the ones who really care. They're motivated. And we know that that fringe really cares. So, yes, he won the nod from the Democratic Party. I don't think ultimately there are enough Democrats who are behind him. Hakeem Jeffries still has yet to sign on. And they actually did meet Kevin, right? Isn't that incredible? That Hakeem Jeffries, right, in theory, the leader of the party. And the other thing that gives me cause for pause is, remember, in this city of 12 million people, New York City, there are 1 million Jews. And he is someone who has been adamantly anti-Jewish. And I can't imagine the Jewish community is just going to roll over and let him come marching in.
Okay, so this message here, and I'm glad LB said this, they're really having trouble controlling the mayoral race. This message goes to what you're saying, because this message is very confusing to the voter they want to motivate, okay? Because if you're saying that he's not going to win, it makes people not vote in opposition. So that's very stupid to say if you want to take him out. That's objectively true. I can't really, there's no objectivity, but I'm just telling you, if you don't want this guy to get elected, you have to make a sense of urgency. And he's couching it with a sense of urgency for the Jewish vote, which, as we've seen, it's between 10 and 13% of the city. Now, the Jewish vote, I wonder what percentage of the city it is, because 13%, I assume a lot of those, especially Hasidic Jewish people have a lot of children, people that are not of voting age. But if you're relying on telling people, hey, don't worry, he's not going to win because the Jewish vote will save us, that's an interesting strategy, and I think it's a poor one, honestly. Andrew says it's like a monopoly, but they control the majority of jobs in the region. That's interesting, man. I'm going to read more about that. I haven't heard of that. Like Walmart or Amazon in a small town, Montesopny. Okay, so it's kind of like I'm not anti-company town myself. I think company towns were kind of a cool invention. But the modern version of the company town, which is this hell we live in, would be a Montesopny. That's interesting to make that distinction. Interesting. LB thing says, but Adams and Cuomo's egos won't let them. We're going to get into that because that is something that is so weird, and I can't figure out the reality of. It's so weird. Makes no sense.
Doing some informal polling on that. You've got older Jews who are very against what he is dishing out, and they stand by Israel. Some of these younger Jews that have come up through the college campuses and through the systems, they're the ones that are kind of pushing for him, and they're voting for him because they're anti-Trump, they're anti-Benjamin Netanyahu, they think they're fascist.
And apparently anti-Israel.
And they're anti-Israel in their own interests. So that's one point. But I just want to push back on the polling a little, because
that is probably some of the most insane comment I've heard here. Let's hear it again. Let's see what he said, because he's not on screen when he says it. Let's listen to how insane this is.
Trump, they're anti-Benjamin Netanyahu. They think they're fascist.
And apparently anti-Israel.
And they're anti-Israel in
their own people. Dude, if I ever heard anyone say something like that to me, that I'm against my own people, especially they're not part of the community, I don't know if that man is of the Jewish faith, I'd be pissed off, man. You're telling me what I know about my own people? That's crazy to say. Who says that? That's wild. But it shows you the level they're going to, which is could backfire, because people don't like to hear that kind of stuff. Your own people? Excuse me? What do you mean, your people? Like, that's a bit much. I don't get. That's crazy to say, in my opinion. Wild.
Their own interests. So that's one point. But I just want to push back on the polling a little, because I understand what you're saying about the primary. But the polling right now, he's got roughly 30%. You've got three other candidates. You've got Cuomo, you've got Adams, you've got Sliwa. If they all stay in the race, they split the rest of the vote, he actually could win.
I suppose that's possible, but do you really think that the powers that be are going to let that happen?
I hope not. Where are the powers?
I mean, eventually there's a runoff. You know, you can't have someone, you go head to head. You know, you can't just have a ticket split three different ways and then the one who got the most votes, especially if you can't even get a majority.
Right.
I don't know, the powers that be is an interesting statement.
Well, it depends who they are.
Yeah, interesting is one way of putting it. That's, at the very least, depends on how you feel about democracy. You know, if you care about that. It's very anti-democratic. You know, someone who doesn't believe that we are in a democracy and maybe that's not the most ideal system, I don't really care. But I think most Americans do care about that. And when you say the powers that be will prevent a candidate from winning, kind of reminds me of, you know, what they said about Ron Paul and all these other stuff. That's pretty crazy. That's pretty crazy to say. Andrew says Fox News is like, we love the Jewish people. They're really good at controlling It's kind of getting to that level, Andrew. I agree. It's really freaking weird to say that kind of stuff. Like just being racist towards them while saying they like, that, I don't know, man. Like, who says that? Who says that? We love the Mexicans and how they control all the burrito stands. Like that's literally what it sounds like. It's fucking crazy to say. LB says, you thought that was O'Leary? No. If it were O'Leary, that'd be really off cuff.
If they're the people who are mixed into this race, Andrew Cuomo thinks he's a power that is or will be.
Maybe people who think
but he also thinks he's a martyr, Brian, and he thinks that he is going to win this race. He's staying in it, and he's saying if a socialist takes over New York City, even he would have to leave and go to Florida.
Yeah, and apparently he's joking about that. He wanted to make clear that he's committed. This is why I disagree with you on whether Mamdani's going to win. I don't want him to win, for sure. Right. It's the last person. But the people he's running against are so ineffective, and they're so unimpressive. I mean, Andrew Cuomo is hanging out with, this is probably why he didn't want to meet with you, because Cuomo's hanging out with the Hamptons crew, okay? And he's talking to these guys, and he's saying, if this guy becomes mayor, I'm going to leave town. And it's like, how in the world, as a guy who used to run New York State and now wants to run the city, can you say, I'm going to get out of this place if I don't win? I mean, even if you're joking about that, that is the stupidest thing you can say. Yeah. And it tells me that he is so out of touch. And I think Mamdani is like, look, let Cuomo meet with the Hamptons crowd. And I'm gonna advertise about that, and I'm gonna nail him on that. And I'm not gonna talk to Kevin O'Leary because I don't want to be anybody who's near the quote-unquote rich elites. And he's gonna take, in a four-man race, he's gonna take just enough in a four-man race to win on that basis. And that's why I think you gotta take what he's doing really seriously right now.
Very smart. Wow, that's the best analysis I've heard outside of PBD's analysis that was actually good, where he was like, he outworked everyone. This is very, very good. Obviously true. Why do you care about meeting with Kevin O'Leary when the other candidates don't matter? And they're already meeting with that same cohort of person. It's very, very good analysis. And that's the stuff you'd see more on this type of channel. You know, the more serious CNBC and Fox Business that are financially oriented. Very, very good analysis. I'm glad someone said it. What's up, Grizz? Does the establishment want Cuomo to pull out? I don't know, Grizz. This is weird because, like we said, let's look at it real quick again. And let's take a break here and let's go to Twitter after this. But look at this. Like, they're both underperforming insanely. Look at this. Look at Adams at 9% and Cuomo from a high 17.5% down to 13.6%. And the other candidate is in Africa.
Cradle of civilization.
Like, it just doesn't make sense. Who cares about, like, who do you want to pull out? Because you would want Silva and Adams to pull out if you're going by the money. You know what I mean? Like, but it just doesn't make any sense. This is insane. They might have mentioned a clip here that I saw on Twitter or X. Let's see here. Still getting used to that even after a while. There was something here that Cuomo said which was insane, man. Well, first let's see this thing that Cuomo said, which is pretty wild to hear.
The primary was a shock to me. I never saw it coming, frankly, and I lost, and it's embarrassing to lose, and it hurts to lose, and the way it happened was even worse, because all the polls had me up 15 points. And all the geniuses say, you know, you're up 15 points, you want to play it safe, and he was nowhere on the radar screen, Mamdani, just nowhere on the radar screen. So we played it safe. I didn't engage him, I didn't debunk him enough, I wasn't aggressive enough, which is really ironic, because all my life I'm too aggressive, I'm too combative, I'm too tough. And then on election day, there was an historic turnout that nobody has ever seen anything like it. There was an explosion of the under 30 vote.
This is obviously leaked, but this is crazy to say, even in private in politics. Why would you represent yourself? You're representing yourself as weak, even if you're blaming your staff. You should not say this kind of thing. Why would you say it? I don't know. This is wild to see. And sure, there may be some truth to it, but this just smells of, like Andrew said, copium. It's copium. Like, dude, you should have been able to see this stuff. You had millions and millions of dollars. Same reason that people were pissed at Kamala Harris when she lost. You had the resources that other people did not have. Grizz says it's been quiet in New York, but it's going to ramp up as we get closer. Yeah, Grizz, and I think that goes to what we covered earlier, where, like, I understand why he was going to Uganda. What's the point of not going to Uganda right now? You know? LB says he was on TikTok. Yeah, that's the other thing that they kept saying. I'm not sure if he mentions it here, but yeah, that's the stupid thing they keep saying, that TikTok is what won him, not, you know, working.
Under 30 white socialists who voted 3, 4, 5 times what anyone had ever seen. And that totally changed the numbers. There were about 100,000 young under 30 who had never voted before. I lost by 100,000 votes, 400,000 to 500,000. The young people who came out, they were socialists.
There's also something crazy in that this is at the Hampton Synagogue. This, to me, sounds like you're explaining yourself to school director about why you did something wrong. This should not have leaked. If it were a serious campaign, whoever did this would be crucified. This is crazy to leak. Why are you explaining? First rule of politics, if you haven't learned this after 2016 by now, is don't explain yourself. Fuck them.
And they were pro-Palestinian. And I would wager that in that primary, more than 50% of the Jewish people voted for Mamdani. More than 50%. because with those young people, the under 30 people, they are pro-Palestinian, and they don't consider it being anti-Israel. I am, as you know, 100% supporter of Israel. I went out and I spoke to that. I spoke to that everywhere. That's my tradition. It was my father before me. I was the most aggressive governor in the...
What you're saying here is that, I love that tweet that we saw a few weeks ago where the guy was like, the reason Mamdani won is because he's the only guy who ran for mayor. What are you talking about, dude? Who cares about any foreign state in this election? You're running for a municipal office. What does anyone care about Israel when, you know, the streets aren't clean? What the fuck are you talking about, man? LB says, and this is good here, I'm not on TikTok, live in Washington, even I heard about Mamdani. Yeah, because he ran a good campaign. Like, this is all cope and just like insane shit. Andrew says clapping for, look, but Andrew, like, besides how anyone feels about that conflict, who the fuck cares in terms of a municipal office? If they were running for senator or for representative, this excuse would kind of make sense. This is just crazy. This is crazy.
The United States on behalf of Israel. I was the first against BDS. We did a number of trade missions back and forth. We have the largest Jewish population outside of Israel, and I was proud to be the strongest advocate. But many, especially younger people, don't consider saying anti-Israel is different than being anti-Semitic. Being anti-Israel to them means anti-Bibi's policies, anti-Israel government policies. And they are. And they are. And they were highly motivated, and they came out to vote. And that totally distorted what was expected. And in many ways, it was a national wave that has been building. This socialist wave in the Democratic Party, this AOC, Bernie Sanders going across the country, the No Kings, brought out hundreds of thousands of young people at rallies all across the country, basically fueled by anti-Trump. But anti-Trump then fits with socialism, then fits with pro-Palestinian, and he was the perfect vehicle for this under 30 wave of reform and a new reality.
If I were on this campaign and this came out, I would quit immediately. This is so embarrassing, man. This is embarrassing. It's sad, honestly. Like, even if you don't like the guy, who says something that's stupid publicly, man? Like, it just doesn't make sense. Okay, it's private. You have to assume everything's going to be leaked. Especially if you're speaking in a place of worship. You don't know who's in there. Unless you do. Andrew says, talking about an issue not relevant to NYC to a crowd not in NYC. Absolutely. Like, it's crazy shit, man. Crazy shit. Chris says the whole script of I've always been loyal to you is getting old. It's not effective with current politics. It's also like, I just don't understand how no one has made the commentary outside of people online that this is just really weird. And it puts, Andrew said it earlier, like, oh, you know, you're basically saying there like, oh, the reason we lost is because of people of the Jewish faith. So you're saying that they control elections? Is that what you're saying? It's crazy. Yeah, you're right, LB. You said you wouldn't because they bought your soul a long time ago in reference to quitting. Yeah, but even like if you were a pure psychopath, you'd be like, dude, I have to quit this campaign. This doesn't make any sense. Like, we're done. Like, what are we going to say here? Oh, I'm sorry, that wasn't meant to leak. Okay, it did. You know, this is crazy shit to say and for it to come out.
But I bring jobs. That's bipartisan. I create jobs. That's what I want to talk about. Even AOC, even Elizabeth Warren, they'll take a meeting because they understand the value of job creation. And he should too. The worst thing, if he becomes mayor, all these people remain unemployed in New York. That's what they're complaining about. That's who's appealing to. You got to get guys like me to come here and invest our capital to create jobs. period.
He doesn't want private sector. He wants government jobs. He wants people working for the state, living in state housing, eating state food. You're like the antithesis of that. Why would he like you?
This is also why his message is a problem, because it is hypocritical to a certain degree. He's saying he wants to solve an affordability crisis, Kevin, but you're not going to do that if people aren't working and they're not thriving. If everybody is just relying on the government, the city goes.
I have a daughter living here in New York. She does not want to go down by the river and eat government cheese.
Right.
She wants a job. And a lot of young people want jobs. And they listen to his rhetoric, and I agree it's fringy.
This is, okay, in theory, you know, they are job creators and all this, right? But especially as someone who's in Miami, dude, these tech billionaires moved here, and all the jobs that were offered were filled by people from California who moved here. So what the fuck are you talking about, man? And you know what? Maybe he's right. Maybe he's created jobs. He worked in toys also. Then give me concrete examples of jobs you've brought places where you've employed locals. Because if you're creating tech jobs or these amorphous jobs that are taken by people that are not from there, what do I care about these jobs that you're creating? Oh, it goes the other way too. If you're creating jobs by bringing in Walmarts and Dollar Trees, well, thank you, but we don't need those jobs here. We need actual jobs, you know? LB says, Leo, you have integrity. That's the difference. Thank you, LB. Thank you. I pay good money to see O'Leary's daughter eat government cheese. Yeah, I doubt O'Leary's daughter has had any struggle. And that's her prerogative. You know, that's fine. You know, not everyone starts out the same, you know. But it would be humbling. Grizz says, I doubt O'Leary's daughter is having issues finding a job. Thank you, Grizz. And that's what I'm saying, is that these guys talk about these jobs, and these jobs, I love hearing about these fictional jobs that exist. Everyone knows that jobs posted on job boards, most of them are fake now. So what jobs are we talking about? I would really like to know. Which job is Kevin O'Leary offering me? I really want to know. Kevin O'Leary, please tell me what jobs you can bring in Miami that I could fill with my resume. Please tell me. And if you have them, shit, man, I'll be right there with you. Zoran, get your ass over here and talk to Kevin. He's going to give me a job. But what jobs are you talking about? What jobs are people with no college education or even with a college education? You know, Gen Z at this point, men specifically, whether you have a college education or not, it's the same unemployment rate. So what the fuck are you talking about?
But at the end of the day, he would be very wise to listen to his advocates and those that want to question his policies. That's me.
Right.
I'm just one guy. If he doesn't want to take a meeting with me, that's fine. But I think he's missing out on all the other investors that need to talk to him. I need to know what's real and what's BS about him.
Yeah,
that's what I care about.
Well, I have to say, your daughter may be an exception. There are a lot of young people who would like to get fed by the government, at least to start, who would like to work for the government. They see the government as a solution. And the idea that we can rely on the people in charge to take care of this, I think, is naive. We've seen the Republicans, they're not responding to this issue. They think it's a one-off situation. I don't think that at all. We're already seeing socialists.
Especially this criticism here is insane, because how does every lawyer start? And this is a building full of lawyers, the Fox building. They start in the prosecutor's office, unless you're very lucky. There are people who are lucky and they either know someone or they're very talented or they're very smart in how they apply, and they start in the private sector. Most people that are in law starts in the prosecutor's office. So what the fuck are you talking about? What is the shame in working for the government to get your start, like you're saying? What shame are you putting on people? Andrew says, I've hit almost 30 applications now while getting hired. Andrew, I gotta tell you, man, I think you gotta hit like 3,000 to get any interviews, man. And boomers will tell you, oh, you're not persistent enough. Dude, I feel you, man. Like, I know there were more jobs before. So, you know, I tell you, man, don't stop trying. You know, keep hitting those applications. I know it's tedious. There's an app called Simplify, Simplify, I think. It's an extension that you can use to apply to jobs a lot easier on Chrome and Brave browser. Use that shit, man. It will help you fill out a lot more applications. Genuine advice, dude. Like, use that. Because otherwise, I feel you, man. 30 jobs and you're not getting anything. Dude, you got to do like 1,000. I feel you. Grizz says, wasn't O'Leary involved with promoting Sam Bankman-Fried's crypto exchange? Yes, Grizz, he was. So those are the jobs that Kevin O'Leary's bringing. That's very funny. I didn't got that. Good catch, Chris. Good catch. Audio says, yeah, you have to get up to in the thousands nowadays, unfortunately. It's just a sad reality we have to deal with, guys. But please download that app, man. It'll help you.
Candidates popping up in Washington state. Chicago is essentially run by a socialist. This is something the Republican Party has to meet head on. And we need to do it by talking about the benefits of capitalism. It's not just about efficiencies. Republicans always talk about how it'd be so much better to have companies run businesses. True, but what about the moral benefits of capitalism? People become wealthy. They can pilot their own ship. They take charge of their own life when they own their own company. That is a
Bro, what are you talking about? Like, this is a message that would have worked 20 years ago at minimum. Where, look, this is objectively true. I've said it before. This economy, the American economy, is an economy where it's not a W-2 economy. Okay, if you want to live in a W-2 economy, find some ancestor of yours that was in Europe and get a European passport and go live over there. In any situation you're in, start your own company. You don't know where it's going to go, but start it, because it's much better to be an owner than an employee. It's true. But most people haven't been told that. And that's not fair for you to suddenly spring on them and say, oh, it's your fault because you don't own a company. Well, maybe if you were teaching people that instead of how to be a good employee, which is what you taught everyone, and then took the jobs away, go fuck yourself. It just doesn't make sense. Audio says, so many job listings are straight up fake for tax cuts. For tax cuts, maybe, but it's mostly to make companies look bigger and like they're more expanding, you know? I hate everything says, also Fox News, we don't like libertarians. Yeah, so how libertarians are the people who have Randian ethics, Hoppian ethics. By the way, what's up, man? Those are ethics that are developed in order to propagandize for free markets. And whether you agree or disagree with them, it's an actual thought process that's been thought of. Who's doing that? On the conservative, yeah, that's what they are, the conservative wing. It's the most uncreative and stupid political ideology that's ever existed, conservatism. It's just dumb. From the start, Edmund Burke, to me, was a freaking moron, dude. These people are just uncreative. Grit says pilot program using less than allocated funds and suddenly you're the end of capitalism. Right? But even just, you have to, it just doesn't make sense to me where it's bad for for you to work for the government. A lot of people got their start working for the government. Vice magazine started off getting government funds, and it created $1 billion company. Okay, so like, what are you talking about?
Massive benefit that needs to be explained, in my view.
And there are also a lot of lessons to be learned from countries that people have fled from. They've come here because they want to get away from socialism. Telling those stories, I think, is usually really helpful for people, because you sign up for a bill of goods. It happens every time there's regime change, whether it's political or philosophical, or even religious in some cases also. People sign up for something. They never tell you what you're really going to get until you get it and you realize you made a big mistake and there's nothing you can do to undo it.
You know, the least happy people this weekend, though, I think, were the people of Florida finding out they might get Cuomo.
Right.
They're probably building a wall, right? They're building a wall in Florida right now.
Ouch.
The danger is... I hope so, man. We need that. That is from here. Let's watch this part here, because this is even more insane, because the Cuomo campaign... I don't know who's running this, man.
Andrew Cuomo planning his escape from New York if his socialist opponent Zohran Mamdani becomes mayor.
Cuomo insisting he's still in the race, saying, quote, "It's all or nothing. We either win or even I will move to Florida. God forbid."
Everything that is ugly, cruel, stupid, but most importantly, ugly, everything is your fault.
Who says this? This is... It's cruel, ugly, and stupid. It's just... who says this running a campaign, man? This is the last flight out of a third world country saying, if I lose the election, I'm going to be imprisoned, so I'm going to leave on a plane. This is banana republic behavior. Who says this? This is crazy.
Vivek Ramaswamy is running as Republican for governor of Ohio, and he joins us now. So great to see you. So, there is something to be said about the way Zohran Mamdani has actually talked about important issues. And they're issues that you have always been very vocal about talking about, particularly to young people. How do Republicans salvage these young voters?
Look, I think it's a great question. And the fact that
Grizz says, plan an escape. I'm sure the private jet escapade will be a brutal endeavor. I completely get what you're saying. It sounds to me like Batista making that last flight out of Cuba, just being like, all right, it's over. I've lost. Like that is what, but yeah, you're right. It's a private jet. It's not going to turn into the next Soviet oblast, the New York oblast. Like, what are you talking about, man?
The matter is, in the Biden years, at least, that was when it was last surveyed, Gen Z had more favorable attitudes to socialism than capitalism, which to me spells the right answer. You can bash Mamdani or the other side all we want. What we're missing is making a positive case for capitalism itself. And if we're being honest, that's something that even the GOP at times has now in recent years gone soft on. I think we got to explain to the people, especially young people, why capitalism is the best system known to the history of man to lift people up from poverty. Think about Andrew Cuomo telling New Yorkers you're just going to flee for Florida is not the solution of a leader. Step up and actually offer actual solutions.
This is a very good analysis. And all he's saying is you need to make better propaganda. And that's just true. For any political movement, you need better propaganda. Why did, the Taliban win in Afghanistan? Because of good propaganda. Why did Fidel Castro win in Cuba? Good propaganda. And you have to make propaganda. It's just insane. Everything says, hey, how are you going, Leo? What's up, man? With all this outrage, you think the Republicans would put their support towards Yeah, because these guys are so pathetic. It's just crazy. Like, who can you really support? Except Sliwa at least is less slimy and gross than. Did he say he's leaving the state? He's less bad optically than Cuomo or Adams. Andrew says Cuomo November after losing Code Villages. Oh, man, Andrew Cuomo would do great in the villages. He'd clean up.
To things like the affordable housing crisis in New York City, which is a major issue across the country. You want to bring down the cost of housing? Start with bringing down property tax rates. Follow through with constructing more housing. Get the red tape stopping the construction of housing out of the way. Those are things a state government, and in New York City's case, even a city's government can do. That's what we're going to be doing in the state of Ohio. And I hope that in the Midwest, in the heart of the country, the state where I was born and raised, we're able to provide.
So this is interesting from Vivek because he's obviously attacked Zohran in the past. We've seen that. And I was attacking Cuomo. So I think he's just, before I thought it was, he was trying to help a candidate, but I think he's just trying to elevate his campaign by referencing these other ones. And that's not bad. It's not bad. Andrew says slapping granny fannies in the villages is destiny. That'd be a good one, man. Sliwa should make that ad.
Those positive alternatives, because I think in the long run, that's what's going to be required for conservatives and Republicans to make our case, rather than just really in a soft, superficial way, just bashing the other side. That's what's missing, and I hope that's what we're able to bring. I'm going to do.
And everything says I do kind of agree with Vic on the housing issue. I completely agree with. I think you're completely right, man. Because and he's right too. Because it is supply, and it's also lowering property taxes for people that can't pay them and raising them for people that can. That's just simply a fact. And I may have my problem with Vivek, but he does seem to be inclined in that direction where he's actually thinking through a policy proposal. And is that effective? Do people vote on policy? Probably not. But it's something that the other campaigns should integrate.
Do my part in my home state.
You know, I couldn't agree more. I do think we need to make a better case for capitalism. I think also, Vivek, you and I both probably agree that our schools have been indoctrinating our kids, especially here in New York City. You can imagine what kind of messages they're getting about socialism versus capitalism. But to your point, capitalism that is not sort of grounded or parallel with...
All right, everyone, just for time, because as you guys saw in the end there, this is for the deeper portion of the show today. I want to talk to you guys about cybernetics. Cybernetics is a field that is relevant to politics because cybernetics doesn't really exist anymore. It was the study of systems. And it existed from the end of the Second World War till about the 1980s or 90s. And there's this documentary here called I War that I highly recommend you guys watch all the way. I'm interested in watching the first 20 minutes. I actually discovered it because a few years ago at this point, I remember there was a 4chan meme that went viral on X, or Twitter at the time. They were saying that Latin America never invented anything. And that's not true because Chile basically invented Amazon in the 1970s with telex machines. All right. And this documentary covers that. However, what I think the value is for a viewer like you is going to be to see the connection you see in terms of systems and politics, because politics is something that is systems based. This is a documentary, and cybernetics in general teaches you about technocracy. It helps you understand the way that people like Elon Musk or any other elites like that would think. So let's start here. It's very well done, and it's a tiny documentary. It's done by a few professors out of a college, and I think there's a lot to learn from this. Highly recommend you watch the whole thing. We can't watch the whole thing. It's very long, but I'd like to show you guys the origins of how the world that you live in, this postmodern hell we're in, that where it comes from. All right. Really quick, Grid says, anything to do with the rumors of medical implants for rural areas once they implement healthcare cuts there? Technocracy. Yeah, technocracy, this is going to help you understand any system, including those Medicaid cuts and how a technocrat thinks. While Trump can't be said to be a technocrat, he surrounded himself with those.
One afternoon, deep in the apocryphal history of China, Empress Lezhu was preparing tea in her garden when she noticed the cocoons of silkworms on a nearby mulberry tree. She took some cocoons back to her tea table, accidentally dropping one into her cup. Upon removing it, she discovered a strand of thread dangling from the cocoon. She pulled and pulled, and the strand continued to grow. Lezhu had discovered silk. Gifted a grove of mulberry trees by her husband, the Yellow Emperor, Lezhu developed sericulture, the science of silk production, which for centuries would be among China's most valuable state secrets. The Chinese scrupulously guarded the origins of silk for more than 2 millennia after its discovery, until it spread to India sometime around 150 BC, as the inevitable result of the thriving trade between the two countries. Another 600 years passed before the mystery of sericulture finally reached Europe, whose people had believed for many centuries that silk was simply harvested whole cloth from certain trees native to China. Silk processing remains the same now as it was thousands of years ago. The cocoons are placed in hot water to kill the larvae and loosen the filaments, which are combined to form yarn, wound, and dried. A single cocoon may yield 1,000 yards of silk. Durable, soft, dirt-resistant, easily dyed, the perfect fabric. This nearly invisible thread, woven into a textile exuding sensuous luxury, predates the discovery of perspective drawing, but would centuries later come to undergird visionary technologies of human disembodiment.
If you guys haven't seen that, it's actually very cool. I saw it in China of how they do it. It's pretty cruel because you actually realize they do kill the little bug. Everything says average ancient Chinese history. Yeah, this documentary is very cool. It ties in everything. It teaches you the whole history of technocracy.
Digital images originated with cartographer Claudius Ptolemy in the 2nd century AD. The system of coordinate pairs contained in the alphanumeric commentary of his maps allowed them to be visually reconstructed without distortion from strings of letters and numbers. However, it was Joseph-Marie Jacquard, a silk weaver in Lyon, France, around the time of the Revolution, whose invention of the punched card for use in his automatic looms presaged today's vision technologies. Jacquard took the digital image, then obscure, and gave it over to mass production in the medium of silk using punched cards. These cards would become the physical basis of computation for the next century and a half, repurposed to this end by Charles Babbage, who kept in his foyer a mechanically woven silk portrait of Jacquard, which most of his visitors mistook for an engraving.
If you guys are older, you might remember punch cards. I remember them. I had a teacher that used to, she gave me one actually. Grizz says, what's the name of the video? This is called iWar, Cybernetics and Project Cybersyn. That was a Chilean project that did this. I Hate Everything says, I remember silk was very expensive back then and very valuable. It's still expensive now, man, because you still have to do that with a larvae, and it's very hard to do with machines.
Babbage is often mislabeled the inventor of the computer based on his unrealized plans for the analytic engine. Yet its predecessor, the difference engine, the world's first automatic mechanical calculator, could not have existed without Joseph Clement, a London blacksmith and draftsman who began his profession by building a lathe on which he made the wind instruments he taught himself how to play. Clement's devotion to his work carried him to the edge of the possible. He worked for years with some of the pioneers of mechanical engineering. This seemed to make him an ideal partner for Babbage, who needed in the manufacture of his wheelwork levels of constancy and precision rarely seen outside contemporary Switzerland. The collaboration between the two was close, and given the complexity of the machine, it is impossible to say with any certainty how much of its implementation should be attributed to whom. The first piece of the first difference engine, what Clement called the beautiful fragment, was delivered to Babbage in 1822. Clement and Babbage were from separate social classes, and neither could ignore what would become the reason why the difference engine could not be completed. Clement allowed all the workers of his shop to keep whatever tools they made in the course of fulfilling a client's order. Babbage found this unacceptable. He wanted the new tools used to create the difference engine moved to his own estate, where he planned to pay individuals trained only on specific machines wages far lower than those of Clement's artisans. Their relationship quickly collapsed, leaving Clement to fade into historical obscurity and Babbage to eventually die alone, widely known in his time as a crank with a penchant for shouting down street musicians.
If you don't know the history of Charles Babbage, I actually did a project on him in middle school. It's interesting what they're pointing out there because it describes a similar relationship that Edison, another technocrat, had with his employees. He was a major inventor in the field of computers. He actually trained Ada Lovelace, I believe, who was one of the most famous female computer scientists. No problem, Grizz. Hope you watch the whole thing. It's really worth it.
In the 4th century, around the time Europe was introduced to silk, China was introduced to a nascent Buddhism. The teachings of the Yogacara as delivered by Parmatha, which in turn prompted Xuan Zang's legendary Journey to the West in Search of the Law. But China did not receive these teachings directly from India. Instrumental to this transmission were the Indo-Greek cultures of Central Asia, whose states would later be destroyed in conflicts featuring weapons which could be both crafted and wielded with efficiency by very small groups of people. Though the instruments of war had changed considerably on the eve of the 20th century, the general condition of war was still one of amateur weapons. This is not a time of inaccessible antiquity, but just beyond the threshold of living memory. A world where deadly force was so egalitarian, so comprehensible, so bound to human will and action. The emergence of modern specialist weaponry during World War I was accompanied by the first images of cyborgs. The cyborg never consists simply of a mind and body, but of all technologies by which we externalize aspects of our sensing, thinking, and communicating. The cyborg emerged from the Dada of Weimar Berlin, where technologically mediated perception had turned inward to reveal a humanity which was inextricably bound to its physical technologies of mediation.
Now, if you're a film fan, you're not really surprised at the German origins, because if you've seen Metropolis, Metropolis was one of the first films to really deal with the prospect of AI and AGI, and it was made in the 20s. Highly recommend you watch it. It's free online because the copyright's expired. And you can see how that ingenuity came out of Germany, and it's all the problems that we're facing now. This is why it's important to watch this, because you might think all these problems are new, but they have a long history.
Sensory perception and interior perception are transformed by repeated interpretations of the ancient idea that who we are is not something bound by organic limits, that the self is not contained by a body, but extends into the world and is distributed throughout it, an idea capable of countering and reinforcing the mutual tendency of science and religion to move the place of all power to a transcendental, supersensory realm.
Who does that remind you of? What technology? That is Neuralink. That is Elon Musk and his family. That is what we deal with on a daily basis. Audio Vibe says Metropolis is a great movie. I love Metropolis. Great one.
George Grosz, one of the founders of the Berlin School of Dada, sometime before fleeing to America, wrote, "War freed many an individual from the environment he hated and the slavery of his everyday routine. This is one of the psychological causes and enigmas of war, and that is why there is and always will be war." In the summer of 1918, the head of Princeton's math department was put in charge of the U.S. Army's Aberdeen Proving Ground, a weapons training and testing facility on the shore of Chesapeake Bay, the same style of military brain trust as Los Alamos a generation later. There, every available American mathematician was being enlisted to compute the artillery firing range tables of the escalating European war's many new kinds of weapons. Among them was Norbert Wiener, a young mathematician and natural scientist who had graduated from Tufts and Harvard before joining the world's first war mobilization of mathematicians and physicists. Wiener's wartime engineering career would last from the First World War and into the Second, when in 1940, MIT President Vannevar Bush met with President Roosevelt at the White House, emerging with a mandate to form and direct the National Defense Research Committee, NDRC, charged with initiating and coordinating scientific military research. Bush's first initiative was to...
Now, what they kind of skip over there, which is interesting, and we might talk about it another day, is that there was another war in between World War I and World War II that was very, very important in terms of those two wars, which is called the Chaco War, and it was between Paraguay and Bolivia. And it's where everyone sent military observers and allowed new technology to be used because they knew a war was coming. And this smaller scale war, I mean, this is where aerial reconnaissance was developed from the Bolivian side and mortar warfare was developed from the Paraguayan side. So this interwar war was incredibly important, and a lot of what you're talking about here in this documentary was tested down there. Huey Long was actually a big opposer to that war.
Organize a network of 700 universities and research institutions, whose resources he would apply to war-related scientific and technical projects. He sent personal letters soliciting suggestions for the best use of scientists in the coming war. At the same time, the military became itself a primary source of funding for scientific research through the newly established Office of Naval Research and similar counterparts elsewhere in the military.
Again, we've talked about how the universities are a huge part of the MIC, and here you can see the origins of that. That's where all the research was coming from, in addition to government funding.
After the new National Science Foundation was chartered by Congress, America's government would for the first time pay more money to large corporations to conduct scientific research than to scientists at universities and research institutes. Such arrangements weren't the only idea, of course, but when the first intimations of what would eventually become the NSF emerged from congressional proposals as an agency charged with overseeing and potentially overriding patents in the public interest, Bush responded by engineering an invitation for President Roosevelt to propose his own suggestions. First, that the public should have no rights to the patents emerging from the new cooperation of government and industry, and further, that the public should have no role in deciding government research priorities.
Where are we seeing that same thing today? with Palantir, right? And the Trump relationship with them. And we've seen that over the course of the last decades in general with Silicon Valley and the executive. It's the same thing, but 100 years ago.
Within weeks, as word of the NDRC's new projects went out discreetly through the ranks of scientists Bush had arrayed, Weiner found his second wartime calling: to develop fully automated range-finding systems for anti-aircraft artillery. While the principles of feedback and electronic control had been discovered at Bell Labs in the 1920s, and automated firing controls existed from the late 1930s in the form of expensive and arcane electromechanical kerosene predictors, Weiner's work on this project in the fields of stochastic processes and controls would prove revolutionary. German bombers during World War II flew at speeds exceeding 300 miles per hour, at altitudes as high as 30,000 feet. Unlike World War I, when artillery could be aimed in simple parabola at slow-moving targets, the flight time of an artillery shell to this height could be as long as 20 seconds, and firing that shot accurately, at a point in space nearly 2 miles downrange from where the plane had been targeted, required a crew of up to 14 men to spot the plane through binoculars and keep it in view, then to relay its changing positions to human computers, who performed hasty manual computations of the plane's projected location and passed those coordinates to the gunners, who, in turn, rotated their heavy turrets into position using hand cranks and, finally, fired a volley of shells toward the target.
This is very interesting in the very dense sense. They're saying, my father told me about this actually as an engineer, that one of the problems with early industrial weaponry is that there were so many factors to take into account, including the rotation of the planet, that made misfiring incredibly common, because you were relying on humans to take into account so many factors in order to blow a plane out of the sky during a war, right? And this scientist that she mentioned was one of the guys who wanted to develop a way of doing this automatically.
The computation of mundane artillery range tables, Weiner now had to create a complete system with which to predict the future position of a fast-moving plane based on its past and present positions, then to calculate range, take aim, and fire with split-second timing and precision. An electronic anti-aircraft system that would, in his words, usurp a specifically human function. On February 1st, 1942, he dispatched his first formal report to the NDRC. Going far beyond a specialization in anti-aircraft weaponry, Weiner redefined the whole concept of control in new scientific terms for the electronic age. The significance of this report to America's post-war technology boom is difficult to overstate. And in the years through the war, the number of American industrial research laboratories mushroomed from about 1,500 to more than 10,000.
If you really think about it, that's insane. A guy who wanted to figure out how to make automatic turrets is the guy who decided on the way that people in the United States, and at this point the whole world, interact with their government as well as technology, and how much access they actually have to these resources. This is why it's so important to know the origins of things, because you might wonder, why is this priced at this and this priced lower? And it all goes back to one guy. These great men of history, great used, neutrally, just people that had a huge impact, were able to do this in ways that they didn't even foresee.
Report, Weiner made it clear that the electric domain of wired signals, radio waves, and radar beams was where control of every form of modern technology would reside forever after.
And that's media. They discovered through trying to take down German planes how to control media and how to control what you see and how you react to it.
He defined the elementary unit of communication, the message, in the broadest technical terms as an array of measurable quantities distributed in time, transmitted by electrical, mechanical, or nervous means. This was the advent of cybernetics. In the 19th century, French physicist André-Marie Ampère, a founder of the science of electricity, used the word cybernetic to describe what he called the art of government. But Weiner would not learn this until some time later, having taken the word from the Greek kybernetes, or steersman. Weiner revolutionized the concept of feedback, making the distinction between biological and physical systems and the different forms of information that could be found in each realm of nature, proving that the principle of feedback was mathematically equivalent to the physiological process of homeostasis. To survive and adapt to the world around them, all communication systems, natural and constructed, need a balance of negative and positive feedback. Receiving and using information is part of the process of adjusting to the circumstances of an environment required for any system to function within that environment. In the span of only 2 years, Wiener conceived of, defined, and quietly announced the coming of the newly unified interdisciplinary science of control, the fruits of which were increasingly picked in consolidated research laboratories. American science turned a corner during this war, taking the entire world with it. As Wiener grew vocal in his condemnation of the new national science leviathan, his relationships with many of his contemporaries came under severe strain.
Interesting, right? How the technocrat looks at you as a biological organism that is just a sum of inputs and outputs. And they knew this so long ago, and it's a criticism that people make from the right and the left in this country of the way people are governed. And you hear this from Tucker Carlson, you hear this from Ro Khanna, but this is how you are viewed, and this is why they are capable of what they are capable of, because this is simply a, for lack of a better word, a sociopathic view of humanity that can only come out of the scientific field.
On the 6th of August, 1945, the term ground zero, first spoken at Alamo Gordo, New Mexico, piqued the ears of a world witnessing Hiroshima consumed by nuclear fire. Nagasaki was destroyed 3 days later. Of the nearly 250,000 killed, 120,000 died instantly. As described by Secretary of War Henry Stimson,
the atomic bomb was more than a weapon of terrible destruction, it was a psychological weapon.
the murder of hundreds of thousands of civilians was instrumental in breaking the resolve of the Japanese, whose moral prohibition against surrender was an unacceptable obstacle to an American military which demanded that victory be unambiguous and total. The morning of August 7th, Wiener furiously declared that the decision to use the new bomb on civilians signified the beginning of a new and terrifying world with which we should have to live ever after, in which, for the first time in history, it has become possible for a limited group of a few thousand people to threaten the absolute destruction of millions without any immediate risk to themselves.
And that's your world. What's so crazy about that is think about the implication that the bomb was not about the casualties. It was about the psychological horror. And they don't have to do this anymore. Now they have social media. They have the media. They have influencers. They have simulated violence. They have actual violence. They have so much that they can use in order to keep you docile and thinking in the way that the technocrat, which this is how the technocrat thinks, right? Who would think this in terms of dropping the nuclear bomb? It's not just about the people we take out. It's also about the effects psychologically. Only someone like that could really enforce their view on the world, because they are at another level that you, maybe I can't get to.
The early post-war years saw a record number of strikes by organized labor, and for many industrialists, the new age of the automatic factory, of machines without men, could not come fast enough. Corporate anti-labor sentiment was shared by many politicians and most of the military, particularly the Air Force, which led the long campaign to bring automation to the aircraft industry and the new domain of the manufacture of guided missiles. Wiener wrote, "The automatic factory and the assembly line without human agents makes the metaphorical dominance of the machines a most immediate and non-metaphorical problem. It gives the human race a new and most effective collection of mechanical slaves to perform its labor. Such mechanical labor has most of the economic properties of slave labor. However, any labor that accepts the conditions of competition with slave labor accepts the conditions of slave labor and is essentially slave labor. The answer, of course, is to have a society based on human values other than buying or selling. This thing will come like an earthquake. The impact of the thinking machine will be a shock certainly of comparable order to that of the atomic bomb.
This is idealistic, the solution, right? But the reality is that when you look at that video of a Tesla bot serving drinks or filling a popcorn bucket, you should think in terms of how these people were thinking back then, which is that you have now accepted that you are competing for that low-level job with a slave. And in accepting that, you are accepting slave wages and slave labor. And that is why we live in hell, because we have accepted that, generally and individually.
The machine is not frightening because of any danger that it may achieve autonomous control over humanity. Its real danger is the quite different one that such machines, though helpless by themselves, may be used by a human being or a block of human beings to increase their control over the rest of the human race, by means not of machines themselves, but through techniques as narrow and indifferent to human possibility as if they had, in fact, been conceived mechanically. Wiener's cybernetics were revolutionary, but still more so may have been his thoughts on the economic value of information. He wrote that the nature of information as a commodity differs radically from that of matter or energy, and so applying traditional market values to the realm of information and communication can only do harm as long as the mechanisms of the market itself do not operate on the basis of human values. He did not intend his criticism of applying a market approach to information as an indictment of any social or economic theory, but as a recognition of a new economic reality unique to the nature of information itself, and concluded that the application of the laws of market commodities to information would lead inevitably to its misunderstanding and maltreatment.
And that we are living in that conclusion, where information is a commodity, it is bought and sold, now at the individual level. Before it was at the corporate level, and at the individual level it is manipulated by the corporate level. What you see on YouTube, what you see on X, what you see on Instagram, this is all manipulated. You are being sold a world that has already been done. And maybe it's true. Maybe if we didn't view as information as a commodity, we would have a much healthier relationship. But that's why I implore you guys, when I said in the beginning, the press, all these people are manipulating you. They see you as a series of inputs and outputs, and they are trying to elicit certain outputs. It's not for your benefit. No one is trying to inform you for the most part. All right? These people are just trying to hurt you and use you.
No scientist in the post-war era stood in sharper ideological contrast to Wiener than John von Neumann, an early and ardent supporter of the military-industrial complex. When the Cold War commenced, von Neumann enlisted as a consultant to dozens of government and industrial organizations, and advocated a preventive atomic attack after the Soviet Union detonated its first atomic bomb in Kazakhstan. Abhorring all forms of social activism, he developed a mathematical theory of games for achieving desired outcomes among competitors in economic transactions, which would become the centerpiece of America's new arsenal. The new atomic military regime of the Cold War required not the numerical computations of the first generation of institutional computers, but elaborate game-like simulations, which provided a means of thinking the unthinkable, of lending mathematical realities to the speculations of generals, businessmen, and politicians. Von Neumann's work was elaborated upon by John Nash and the Rand Corporation as the nuclear balance of terror strategy of mutually assured destruction. And when the American Management Association later sought to translate war games into business games, it hired members of Rand's logistics department as consultants and designers.
All right, we finished chapter 1. That's mostly what I want to get through, but it does get a lot more interesting. The Rand Corporation, by the way, is still around today, and the Rand Corporation is very important in terms of setting policy. If you want to actually get some alpha, read their papers, because these are the most informed people, and they are the people that actually make decisions. If you guys enjoyed this, we can watch part 2 at a later date. But it's such a good documentary because it's dense, but it's telling you the reality of how you are viewed by the technocrat. And the technocrat is at apex power, and they are only gaining more. And they will only have more. unless something else comes about, which is way too idealistic. In the sense of politics, think about that too, about your preferred candidate or the candidate you hate. You are being made to feel something. This is done with very, very intentionally. Okay, it's not something where you really have choice or agency. It's just something where the only agency you do have is that which you can take in and that which you can take out. If you allow yourself to be angered by this stuff, it is consuming your life force and it is making you do outputs that are not worth it for you. They will only hurt you. And that's what frustrates me the most, is seeing people be manipulated by media, politicians, anything, because it just destroys your life. And, I'm not saying advocating anything here, but when the documentary makes the point about how we've all accepted slave labor because the machine is inherently a slave, that is why things are so bad in terms of the way things work. And it will get worse because, as we've said, look, think of it this way. ChatGPT has taken over the law field, the medical field, and if you're using it to accentuate your work and make it easier to, take medical notes, take legal notes, you've accepted that you are the owner of a slave at that point. And at that point, you've accepted that you are a slave in another capacity, and your replacement is incredibly easy if you've already accepted this. This free market doctrine and the Friedman School of Economics, that is mostly what they advocate, in my opinion, whether directly or by consequence. And that's why it's important to know the origins of this stuff. Grizz says, yep, that's good bookmark material for later watch. Absolutely, and you might need to give it a few watches because it's a really, really good doc, Grizz. I hope that wasn't too boring for anyone, because I do want you guys to get something here. So, but back to Zohran, in the tradition, as I said, of Marcus Garvey, Malcolm X, Dave Chappelle, Muhammad Ali, the proud African-American tradition of returning to the motherland, the cradle of civilization, we should be. Vertical says, can you say hi to Mike Hunt? It's my birthday. Oh, hi. Happy birthday. It is good to see politicians and just people going back to the motherland. You have to appreciate the motherland no matter where you are. I encourage you, even if you're a European American, go to your motherland. Go to Poland, to Czechia, to Norway, to Sweden, to England. It's always good to do that. Keeps you grounded, makes you understand where you live. And so don't let anyone make fun of him for it. And his video that he did to counter it was very, very good. I appreciate you guys. I hope everyone enjoyed that. I hope it wasn't too boring, the documentary. Just wanted to get you guys to get something intellectually stimulating. And I'll see you guys tomorrow at 10.
Change the world. My final message. Goodbye. Change the world. My final message. Goodbye. Change the world. My final message. Goodbye. Change the world. My final message.